property leases, common clauses and what they really mean. Introduction to commercial property leases.
So a business lease is fundamentally a contract between two parties. The parties involved are typically a landlord and a tenant. Sometimes you have more than one party. That could be a superior landlord that might have a long-standing interest, and then a head landlord effectively that might have, for example, a 999-year lease, and then they're at their liberty to lease the space to a tenant beneath them.
What are the heads of terms and who usually negotiates them?
So commercial heads of terms are essentially the bones and the salient points that the parties agree before the matter is usually given to a legal entity or solicitor to document. So the parties normally involved with the negotiating heads of terms are the tenant and the landlord representatives, and they are normally the commercial agents or surveyors involved. So you'd normally have, ideally, a chartered surveyor acting for you in the negotiations as early on in the process as possible. They would negotiate directly with the other party's representative, and once those terms are completely fleshed out, you would then pass those to the respective solicitors to formally document.
What is the difference between a licence and a lease?
The difference between a licence and a lease is relatively simple in that a licence makes reference to something where you don't necessarily have exclusive possession. So typically these are things like maybe car spaces where the landlord has the right to move them around effectively, and they're also typically shorter in length. So normally a year or less is a term for a licence. If somebody agrees a licence, especially for the tenant, this is quite important to know, that goes beyond 12 months, there is potential for effectively tenancy rights to be inferred as a result of that. So it's important, if you are agreeing a licence, that it's kept short and sweet and that you renew it on the like-for-like basis. If you're looking for anything longer than 12 months and it's effectively exclusive possession, like an actual piece of property, then it's much better usually to have a formal lease in place to give everybody maximum protection and clarity.
What legislation is in place that protects the parties?
Main legislation that's in place that protects the parties is the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954. All UK commercial leases are governed by this legislation, and it sets out certain rights and restrictions in terms of what a landlord and a tenant can and cannot agree. Fundamentally, it gives the tenant rights in terms of renewal, which can be opted out of as well, so always important to bear that in mind. But ultimately that sets the legislation and the legal backdrop to that.
For more information on how to choose the right property for your business, visit the London Growth Hub website.